Hello dear, Rose here, writer, director, etc. of this podcast audio drama, welcoming you to the third season of the Wessex dramas, The Laodecian. This novel was the last of Thomas Hardy's Novels of Ingenuity trilogy. The story is a gentle romantic comedy set in a rather indecisive heiress's castle. I must warn you, Victorian intrigue, cross-purposes and architecture feature rather heavily in this tale. So throw on a tea gown, put your toes on the fender and tell the butler you are not at home, and let's dive into the drama.
Somerset is standing near to the burning fire. A maid, having shown him in, curtsies and leaves. The door then opens, and Charlotte takes a step in while removing her gloves. She smiles.
Oh, hello, Mrs. Somerset. I see you made it in the end.
Yes, and what a lovely old wood.
Yes, Papa had quite a few hundred acres. This is past whole to Paula, of course, now. I'll just send Papa in from the garden and then wrestle with Cook. She does terrible things to Pork if left unsupervised.
She gestures to the sofa.
He won't be long.
The cook?
No, Father.
She vanishes, and he sits. Sir William then enters, smiles, and cordially shakes the hand of Somerset, who has arisen. Sir William is a tall, almost cadaverous old man with white hair. They sit down and start conversing. As the clock ticks, the dog in front of the fire scratches, and the fire crackles. Then...
Yes.
He looks nervously towards the door, as if to check it before speaking. Sir William leans forward, confidingly.
She, poor girl, was to have married my nephew. His death was a sad blow, it was all. Fortunately, Miss Power is now keeping her company and helping to distract my daughter from her grief.
Somerset leans forwards and nods, concernedly and sympathetically. Charlotte pops her head around the door and both conspirators look up guiltily and smile together. She looks at them both, a bit suspiciously, and then smiles.
Lunch?
They smile, nod, and get up. The maid brings in the serving dishes and puts them down on the table. The chatting party help themselves and they pass the serving dishes up and down to each other. Charlotte sits in the middle of the table, down one long side, and the gentlemen sit at the ends.
Carrots? Well, Mr. Somerset, you're down here sketching for professional purposes, then?
Yes, sir.
Somerset takes the
Thank
carrots, passed to him from Sir William by his daughter.
Success is a mixture of skill and luck, In your art, there are many opportunities. You must grasp them, sir. Grasp them.
Well, if I see any to grasp, I will certainly grasp them, sir.
Potatoes?
He passes the potatoes to Charlotte for Somerset.
Yes. Discover your lucky star. You must make friends while fortune smiles, and you have the opportunity.
I am certainly looking for it.
My daughter has unconsciously followed this maxim and struck up a warm friendship with Miss Power. At the castle, where have the carrots gone?
Papa, you passed them down to Mrs. Somerset.
Well, pass them back! Pass them back! Beans, Mr. Somerset. Now, apple sauce? Apple sauce?
Looks around irritably and then up at his daughter.
But where's the apple sauce, for goodness sake?
It's directly next to you, Papa.
He looks down at it.
Oh.
Charlotte smiles embarrassedly at Somerset. Somerset is sitting with his feet on the fender in an empty saloon. He's drinking some cider and musing. The landlord is talking to someone in the other half of the room behind an etched glass partial partition, whereby Somerset cannot see the landlord's interlocutor.
I've often noticed that folks have failed at more maxims of how to succeed in their fingertips than most wealthy men together.
And he lost all by racing speculation.
Well, that is the speculations in the silver mine and the watering place.
The lot, eh?
Well, the estate, that is, he lost the castle and the contents at a single game of cards. To a brewer, a Mr. Wilkins.
So the daughter's now a hired companion to the present owner, then, eh?
Well, she mostly lives there, and she follows Miss Power around like a lost dog. Whether Miss Power loves her back again, I can't say, for she's as deep as the North Star, she is. A real heiress, she be. A real one.
There is a scraping of a chair as the interlocutor gets up, and there are murmurs as he leaves. The door behind the bar closes too.
Yes, but what is she like?
The telegraph rings, and Somerset hears it as he stands, sketching, next to a middle-aged labouring man who is knocking some nails into a piece of wood and measuring some cable off a roll, with his tongue out, absently. Charlotte is bending over the telegraph listening and writing when Somerset opens the door and looks in the room to see if anyone has answered its ring. He raises his hand to show that he was just checking it had been answered, and he makes to leave when Charlotte comes up to him in the threshold. She smiles and reads the message.
It's another telegram from Paula. Have returned to Markton. Will be at the gate between 4 and 5. How thoughtful of her, and...
She turns her head and listens.
Oh, listen!
She runs across the telegram room to an arrow slit and looks out and down.
Oh, she's down below. I can see a bit of carriage. She's arrived as we were speaking.
She walks back to Somerset.
Oh, the telegraph must have been delayed. I wonder if she'll want an early dinner. She'll have Miss Lunch. Or perhaps she will want afternoon tea and then dinner at the usual time.
Somerset shrugs and smiles.
You must come down and meet her, you know.
Oh, I'm sure she's tired and won't want to be invaded by strangers right away.
No, don't worry. We're quite informal here.
A footman comes along the corridor and presents a card on a tray. Charlotte takes it and reads the card and then turns it over and reads the back. The footman goes back along the corridor.
Is that photographer, Mr. Dyer? He says that Miss Power gave him permission before to take some photographs of the castle. What do you think, Mrs. Somerset?
Somerset smiles and shrugs again.
I've got to go and talk to Cook. Would you possibly have a word with this Mr. Dyer? And if you reckon that he's acceptable, give him permission to do his photography. If you think that he isn't the right sort, though, of course, don't give it him,
I'll do my best.
Mrs. Goodman, Paula's aunt, usually deals with this sort of thing, but she's away at the moment.
I dare say it's all right.
Oh, thank you, Mrs. Somerset. You're so helpful, so very helpful.
She hurries off along the corridor. As Somerset enters, Mr. Dyer turns around from inspecting the fireplace with his hands in the pocket of his coat-tails. He is a youthful-looking 20-year-old with a great deal of self-assurance. His hair is parted from the middle and swings often in front of his face. He wears a few large, gaudy rings. Somerset offers his hand and they shake.
Somerset.
Dare.
I've been asked to see you as Miss Power is away at the moment.
I was given permission, you know. I have my equipment and my assistant with me. I have lived in various countries, but it was in Canada that I invented my new photographic process, which I'm now bent on making famous.
Ah, well, I suppose that's all right then. You're not proposing to sell these photographs, are you?
Oh, no. No, I'm a mere dilettante, and don't follow this art at the base dictation of what men call necessity.
Dare waggles his eyebrows in good humour. Somerset smiles.
Ah, nice. I'll leave you to it then. Ask one of the footmen if you need access to somewhere, perhaps.
Somerset nods and turns away.
Thank you. Marvellous. Toodaloo.
Somerset is ambling along the path back to the inn when he sees the back of a gazebo and the Baptist minister, Mr. Woodwell, standing further along the path, facing the entrance to a gazebo, and, incidentally, Somerset as well. Somerset slows to a halt as Mr. Woodwell, seeing him, starts to include Somerset in his ongoing harangue as well.
You inflict injury upon our cause with your lukewarm backsliding. The lukewarmness of the Laodicians.
An invisible voice is heard from the gazebo.
I'm sorry, but I just decline to attend for the present, and have already been baptized anyway.
I fear that your principles have brought you into contact with the Pedo-Baptists, good lady. But here I will demolish their arguments. Give me about 3 minutes of debate, madam.
No, really, I can't, Mr. Woodwell.
Perhaps you then, sir.
Somerset smiles and steps forward.
Sir, I accept your challenge to us.
The two men each sit down on nearby stones, and then Somerset stands up again and casts a look into the gazebo. There he sees the girl from the chapel, Paula Power. She is beautiful and wears a pale blue gauzy dress and a large hat. Her hair is fair and curly. Somerset smiles and nods to her. Paula glances up at Somerset in surprise and then looks down into her lap again, stroking her very small dog. He sits back onto his stone, facing Mr. Woodwell.
So, sir, you admit of the assertion that the Erastrianism isn't necessarily comprised by Luke's words in chapter 6, verses 8 to 10?
Indeed, sir, but you could hardly assert that Luke is the one who favours the Pedo-Baptist cause when he said that it is only by being born to the Spirit again.
They carry on the combat for quite a while, their voices dying away as their argument is finally subsumed by the sounds of the nearby stream and the birdsong. Eventually, Woodwell testily waves his hand in resignation and dismissal. He gets up from off his stone.
Have it as you will, sir. Have it as you will. I leave the field to you and must return to prepare my next sermon.
He turns to Paula and bows slightly.
Your service, Miss Barr.
He turns and nods stiffly to Somerset.
Sir.
Woodwell stalks off. Somerset looks up ruefully at Paula, who smiles.
Thank you for speaking so eloquently on my side, sir. If your sermons match your performance today, you should have a great attendance of enthusiastic Baptists as your congregation.
Thank you. I believe, however, that your own attendance at baptism was somewhat less enthusiastic recently, madam.
Yes, everyone knows, I suppose. But, well, be that as it may, however, I feel bad that Mr. Woodwell, who is a very kind, generous old man, has perhaps been unnecessarily wounded just now.
Oh, dear. I didn't realise that he was such a man. And I didn't realise that my debate was wounding him either.
He gets up from his stone, smiles, and nods.
I do apologise. I'll go make my peace immediately.
Paula smiles and nods.
Do, sir.
Somerset turns and rushes off after Mr. Woodwell. He gets a little way into the wood when he stops and looks painedly back in the direction of Paula. He sighs and rolls his eyes, realising that he has lost his opportunity for a chat with Paula.
Oh, well.
He turns and rushes on. Somerset catches up with Mr. Woodwell in a glade. He calls and waves to the man, who turns back. Somerset apologises for his combativeness and explains that he didn't mean to offend. He offers his hand, which the minister shakes. They exchange a few more words, and then the old man continues on, while Somerset looks after him. Somerset is juggling his pencils and pads as he enters under the gatehouse into the outer ward. A new landau rolls towards him containing Paula in white with black ribbons, carrying a white parasol with black and white ribbons flying gaily from the top. Paula is heading outwards towards the gate. Somerset crimsons, but manages to nod pleasantly. Paula nods back composedly and drives on. Somerset walks on and knocks at the main keep door. Somerset is just finishing descending some big stairs into the main front hall when he meets Charlotte at the foot. She is dressed for the outdoors.
Good morning, Mr. Somerset.
Good morning, Mrs. Darcy.
We didn't think you'd be here today. Paula's gone to a vegetable show at Markton and I'm just about to join her.
The main door is suddenly opened and Paula walks back in.
Oh, Paula, what has brought you back?
Oh, I just forgot something.
Here is Mr. Somerset, the architect.
Ah, yes. I, had the pleasure of, accidentally meeting with Miss Power in the grounds yesterday.
Yes, and I thought you were a young preacher. How funny. We are honoured, however, by your study of our castle, Mr. Somerset. I have 2 of your father's paintings in it somewhere.
Ah.
Charlotte, I must have a word with Cook.
She turns to Somerset.
We'll see you at lunch, Mr. Somerset.
Paula turns and walks away, pursued by Charlotte.
But I thought we were going to the vegetable.
They vanish through the green baize doors. Through the still open front door, Somerset then sees the carriage being driven from in front of the main door back to the stable block. 2 old labouring men then traverse the hallway, supporting a dazed middle-aged labourer between them by the shoulders.
I told ye, them cables have to go up and around afore they descend.
The afflicted man groans. He is apparently not too injured, but is a little shaky.
Well, beer, LP.
The other 2 nod vigorously. Somerset is sketching a window surround when he hears the gong for lunch. He puts down his pad, brushes his jacket off with his hands, attempts to straighten his unruly hair, and bolts out of the room. As Somerset comes into the dining room, Paula is just entering through the French windows from the garden. She is a breathtaking figure in fine marine green and white gauzes, and resembles an 18th century figure from a painting. There are 4 other people just sitting themselves at the table. Paula's aunt, Mrs. Goodman, Charlotte de Stancy, Mr. Woodwell the minister, and another middle-aged man. As Somerset makes his way to the empty place down one long side, he shakes hands with and nods and smiles at Mr. Woodwell, who cordially responds. Paula smiles at Somerset as she enters and plonks her large straw hat unceremoniously down on a nearby table. She indicates that Somerset is to sit next to her, and as he sits down, introduces him to the man on her other side, as she sits at the head of the table.
Thank you for joining us, Mr. Somerset. May I introduce you to my aunt, Mrs. Goodman?
Somerset turns to smile at Mrs. Goodman.
How do you do?
The aunt smiles back and nods to him.
How do you do, sir?
And on my other side is the gentleman who used to be my father's architect, Mr. Havel.
The men smile at each other and nod. The butler starts pouring the wine, and the 2 footmen offer the toast and pâté, from which the guests help themselves. Mr. Havel is a thin, superior-looking type, with greased-down hair across his brow. He indicates to an old wooden screen across the room and offers comment. He has a nasal, loud, drawling voice a la Kenneth Williams.
Fine old screen. As good a piece of 14th century carving that you will see in this part of the country, don't you think, Mr. Somerset?
He turns his head languorously and dismissively in Somerset's direction.
Oh, don't you think it's C15th, perhaps?
Havel looks sourly at him, and then turns his head away and proceeds loudly to address the room.
I recently saw some workmen in a church smashing up a perpendicular capital with its mouldings wonderfully undercut, and using it as infill, for goodness sake.
He turns back to look at Somerset.
Positive barbarians. Don't you agree, Mr. Somerset?
Somerset puts down his toast.
I suppose so, but, if there was undercutting, then I suppose the capital was somewhat later than the perpendicular.
Havel stares hostilely at Somerset.
Why?
Well, just that they, didn't, undercut during that period?
I don't know about perpendicular, Mr. Havel, but it was so kind of you to advise me about replacing the Saxon parts of this castle the other day.
Havel leans back in his seat and drawls smugly.
Oh, I have no compunction regarding replacement when it comes to wear and tear. Out with the old and in with the new, I say.
Paula turns to Somerset.
What do you say, Mr. Somerset?
Well, that the Saxons didn't build castles, and, well, if there's a single Saxon stone in this castle, I'll eat my cat.
Eat your...
Oh, look!
She points out of the window to Mr. Dyer, with his assistant, photographing the garden.
There's that Mr. Dyer I gave permission to do some photographing recently. So he came, did he?
Yes, but I asked Mrs. Somerset to vet him first. Marauders at the door, you know.
Well done, you two. Very sensible. He seems a rather young man. How funny. He looks a bit like you, Charlotte. Or, at least, the portraits in the gallery.
Charlotte cranes to look.
Does he? I think that maybe he does. And really, I
think him a rather rude young man. He whistles.
They all turn to look again, an ensemble through the window at Dyer. Paula is standing, saying goodbye to her guests at the drawing-room door. Somerset is sitting in an armchair.
Thank you, yes. Goodbye. Thanks for coming. I'll just have a word with Mr. Somerset, Aunt. Thanks.
She closes the door and smiles at him as she sits on the sofa.
Would you mind sitting at that table over there, please? There's some paper and pen for if you want to make notes.
Notes?
Have you actually started your profession yet, Mr. Somerset?
He gets up and goes to the indicated table.
Yes. Well, I finished my studies and registered with the Institute of British Architects.
Good. I want to restore this castle. Would you do it?
Me?
You.
The whole thing?
Well, a lot of it, yes.
Yes, but a budget must be decided upon, certainly. Have you considered, how much?
Paula shrugs airily.
Oh, Whatever's needful, really. 100,000, do you think? Would that be sufficient?
Somerset falls into the indicated chair rather heavily and swallows.
Pounds? Good grief.
Paula indicates the papers with her hand.
Well, perhaps you could show me how you would, think to do it.
Somerset remembers himself, stops gawping, nods, and starts furiously scribbling. Paula comes over and looks over at his sketching. She smiles.
Yes. Ah, yes, I see it.
Somerset looks up.
Miss Power, to be fair to Mr. Havel, your father's old architect, I think that perhaps we should have a competition. You know, to be adjudged by the Institute.
Really?
Somerset shrugs.
Which seems only fair to the fellow. Perhaps you could begin by walking over the castle and giving your requirements to Havel and I together, and then we go away and draw up separate proposals.
Paula shrugs again and sits down in her armchair.
All right, then, if we must. I offered the work to you, though. I'll see you both tomorrow at 10 a.m. then. I'll send a message over now to Mr. Havel.
Somerset stands up and bows slightly.
Thank you, Miss Power.
Paula tilts her head slightly and smiles.
Thank you, Mr. Somerset.
That was an episode of The Laodecian. I would like to thank the amazing cast for this episode. Caro Joy, Catherine Dyer, Neal Highley, John Simpson, Tony Lee, Scott Monroe, James Heseltine, Jonty O'Callaghan, Jenny Dyer, Stephan, John Seal, Peter Allison, Robin Lee, and Tracy Hays. I would also like to thank our brilliant, patient, and multi-talented editor, David Harris, for all of his hard work and patience on this. The music is from Epidemic Sound and is The English Affair by Howard Harper-Barnes. Anyways, see you next time, gentlefolk.